Hello, everyone, and welcome to English Pod, the channel where we make learning English fun. In this series, we break down key words, slang, idioms, and cultural references from each episode of Sex and the City to help you naturally improve your English. Watch our videos either before or after you enjoy the episode to boost your understanding and language skills. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's dive in.
All right, let's jump straight into the vocabulary then. The first word we have is revelation. That means, a surprising and previously unknown fact. Like, the revelation they were secretly married stunned everyone.
Okay.
Now, thinking about Sex and the City, what's the deeper significance of this word in that context? Is there one big moment?
Well, what's interesting about Carrie's experience isn't necessarily one single shocking revelation. It's more of a gradual dawning, I'd say.
Oh, okay. Like little realizations.
Exactly. A series of small realizations about the unexpected gulf between her experiences and, well, those of her younger date. Differences in outlook, life stage, things she hadn't fully grasped initially.
Like things you just assume are shared.
Yeah. It makes you think about how we sometimes enter relationships with assumptions about shared understanding that aren't always accurate.
That's a great point. So less about a secret being exposed and more about a personal understanding kind of unfolding.
Precisely.
Our next word is enigmatic, which means mysterious, difficult to understand. For example, his enigmatic silence only deepened the intrigue. How does this play into the episode?
Well, Carrie, and often her friends too, they seem drawn to men who possess a certain enigmatic quality.
The mystery man trope?
Sort of, yeah. It's that allure of the unknown, someone they can't quite fully read. It creates this initial spark, feels exciting.
Yeah, no.
But as Carrie finds out, it can also be, well, a breeding ground for misinterpretations and ultimately maybe a barrier to true intimacy.
So that initial mystery, is it always a good foundation for a relationship, do you think?
That's a really good question. I mean, it definitely pulls you in, that sense of the unknown. But it feels like eventually you need to move beyond the enigma to something more solid, something real.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have incompatible, meaning unable to exist or work together harmoniously,
Yeah.
the example. Despite their initial attraction, their fundamental values proved incompatible. Where do we see this friction?
Oh, it's pretty central. The core of the conflict really lies in the fundamental incompatibility between Carrie's established life, her career, her social circles, her perspective as someone in her 30s.
Yeah, she's got a routine, her world.
Exactly. And then there's the seemingly more fluid, less defined world of the 20-something guys she encounters, their daily routines, their immediate priorities, maybe even their long-term visions. They just don't align in a sustainable way.
Right. It's that feeling of trying to force two pieces together that were never really meant to fit.
You hit the nail on the head, like trying to connect two different operating systems, as you said earlier.
Okay, next up is irony. The expression of one's meaning using language that normally signifies the opposite, often for humorous effect, like the lifeguard who couldn't swim, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. How does irony feature in Carrie's situation?
Well, the irony that Carrie kind of embodies is quite telling, I think. She's seeking out this youthful energy, right? This supposedly fresh perspective by dating younger.
Upping for a different kind of excitement.
Exactly. But the kind of excitement she actually encounters, the immaturity, maybe the lack of shared experience, it ultimately leaves her feeling more weary and perhaps more aware of her own stage of life.
So it backfires a bit.
It's almost a situational irony, yeah. The very thing she thought would be invigorating ends up highlighting a deeper disconnect.
So the novelty she craved, ironically, brings her face to face with the realities of their different life stages. That's powerful. The next word is superficial, meaning existing or occurring at or on the surface, shallow. Example, their conversations were largely superficial, never delving into deeper issues. Who in the episode seems to represent this, or maybe calls it out?
Miranda, I think, in particular, she's quick to call out the superficial concerns of some of the younger men they encounter.
Like what specifically?
Well, their preoccupation with fleeting trends, surface appearances, that kind of thing, it really underscores her general frustration with the dating scene and how initial connections can often be based on Very shallow criteria rather than, genuine substance.
Makes you wonder how much initial attraction in any relationship is based on the superficial, doesn't it?
It really does. It's something we all probably grapple with.
Okay, following superficial is disillusioned, meaning disappointed in someone or something you discover is less good than you believed. Example, after seeing the company's unethical practices, she became thoroughly disillusioned. Which character experiences this?
Samantha's encounter with the young bartender is a pretty good example of being disillusioned.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yeah, she builds up this initial fantasy, probably fueled by, let's be honest, physical attraction.
Uh-huh.
But then his immaturity kind of shatters that illusion. It leaves her disappointed that he didn't meet the expectations she had, projected onto him.
It's that classic moment where the fantasy bubble bursts.
Exactly. It's humorous, but also pretty relatable, that gap between our idealization of someone and their reality.
Definitely. Our next word is nonchalant, meaning appearing casually calm and relaxed, not displaying anxiety, interest, or enthusiasm. Example.
Yeah.
He shrugged with a nonchalant air, as if nothing mattered. How do the 20-something guys exhibit this?
The 20-something men in the bar, yeah, they're often portrayed as being quite nonchalant about things that seem more significant to the women.
Like what sort of things?
Things like commitment, maybe career goals, future plans. It's presented as a kind of generational difference in how they approach life's big questions.
A perceived lack of urgency.
Yeah, a perceived lack of urgency that contrasts pretty sharply with the women's perspectives. But, is that nonchalance necessarily a bad thing?
Interesting question.
Or could it sometimes be a sign of a different kind of, maybe not maturity, but a different stage?
That's an interesting flip on it. Maybe it's not immaturity, but just a different way of prioritizing things at that stage of life. Less pressure, maybe?
Could be. Then we have naivete, meaning lack of experience, wisdom, or judgment. Example. His youthful naivete was both charming and frustrating. How does Carrie perceive the younger men's naivete?
Does she find it charming or frustrating?
A bit of both, perhaps. Carrie observes a certain naivete in the younger men, particularly in their seemingly boundless optimism, their belief that they have all the time in the world to figure things out.
Right, both professionally and personally.
Exactly. And she views this through the lens of her own experiences, having perhaps learned that life doesn't always follow a neat timeline. There's a certain wistfulness in her observation, I think.
Yeah, almost a recognition of a stage she's moved beyond.
That sense of having the benefit of hindsight.
Definitely. Moving on to mortified, meaning extremely embarrassed or shamed. An example. She was mortified when she tripped on stage. Who has a mortifying experience in this episode?
Charlotte. Charlotte experiences a moment at the art gallery where she feels incredibly mortified after a somewhat awkward social exchange.
Oh yeah, that rings a bell.
It really highlights the ongoing anxieties of navigating social situations and, the desire to make a good impression, regardless of age.
Those moments of social awkwardness feel universally relatable, don't they?
Absolutely. We've all been there, wishing the ground would just swallow us whole.
Totally. Okay, next is cliché, a phrase or opinion that is overused and betrays a lack of original thought. Example, saying opposites attract is such a cliché. How does the idea of cliché come into play here?
Well, Carrie herself is aware of the cliché of the older woman dating the younger man.
Ah, so she's self-aware about it.
Very much so. She's almost examining her own situation to see if it's just falling into this predictable trope, this well-worn narrative.
Or if there's something more unique happening.
Exactly. It's like she's consciously looking at her life through the lens of societal expectations and stereotypes.
It's like she's trying to see if her story is just a rerun of something we've all seen before. Interesting. Then we have the term generational divide, referring to significant differences in values, beliefs, behaviors between people of different generations. Example, the generational divide in attitudes towards technology is quite evident. How is this the central conflict?
Well, you could argue the entire episode really functions as an exploration of the generational divide.
Between Carrie and her friends and the younger guys.
Yeah, between the women established in their 30s and the younger men they encounter. Their contrasting perspectives on relationships, responsibility, their overall approach to life. It fuels a lot of the comedic moments.
But also the underlying tension.
Exactly. The underlying understanding that these pairings might face pretty significant hurdles. It's the unspoken chasm in many of their interactions.
It's the elephant in the room in almost every scene with them, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Next is infatuation. an intense but short-lived passion or admiration for someone. Example, their brief infatuation quickly faded. What realization does Carrie come to about her feelings?
Carrie begins to recognize that what she's experiencing with the younger man is likely infatuation.
Not love, not deep connection.
Right. It seems fueled by the novelty, the different energy he brings, rather than a deeper, more substantial connection built on, say, shared history or future aspirations.
It's the dawning awareness that the initial spark might not ignite a lasting flame.
Precisely. That moment of distinguishing between a fleeting attraction and something with real staying power.
Following that is fickle, meaning changing frequently, especially regarding one's loyalties, interests, or affection. Example, the weather in spring can be so fickle. How does Samantha view the younger men in this way?
Samantha voices a common perception, maybe a stereotype, that 20-something men are often too fickle to commit to serious relationships.
Okay.
She sees them as being at a stage where their priorities and interests might shift rapidly, making the stability required for a long-term partnership seem less likely.
It's a generalization, of course.
Oh, absolutely. But one that reflects certain societal anxieties about commitment at different ages, I think.
Yeah, a perceived difference in priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Next is exuberance, the quality of being full of energy, excitement, and cheerfulness. Example, the children's exuberance filled the room. How does Carrie experience this energy?
Carrie definitely observes the youthful exuberance of the 20-something crowd. She finds it initially appealing, almost infectious even, but she also finds it somewhat overwhelming eventually. And ultimately, it highlights the differences in their energy levels and, maybe more importantly, where they are focusing that energy in their lives.
It's like trying to keep pace with a runner when you're more accustomed to a steady walk.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It's that feeling of being surrounded by a different kind of energy that can be both invigorating and, frankly, exhausting.
I get that. Our final vocabulary word is condescending, having or showing a feeling of patronizing superiority. Example, his condescending tone made everyone uncomfortable. Who encounters this behavior?
Miranda notably experiences this. I think it's when a man speaks to her in a condescending way about her career.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that power dynamics and judgmental attitudes can surface in various interactions. And age, regardless of the specific pairing, can sometimes be a factor in those dynamics.
So it underscores that disrespectful behavior isn't limited to any one age group.
Not at all. It's a disappointing reminder that those power imbalances can appear in all sorts of contexts.
Okay, good point. Now let's shift our focus a bit to some of the phrases and idioms that pop up in the episode. These add so much color.
They really do. They make the dialogue feel authentic.
The first one is be on the same page, meaning to have a shared understanding or agreement about something. Example, it's much easier to work together when everyone is on the same page.
Yeah.
How does this apply to Carrie and her younger date?
Oh, they are a clear illustration of not being on the same page.
Like textbook example.
Pretty much. Their differing levels of emotional maturity, their expectations for the relationship, their perspectives on the future, it all creates this fundamental disconnect. It's almost like they're having two separate conversations simultaneously.
Yeah. What do you think are the key indicators that two people aren't on the same page in a relationship, generally speaking?
Good question. I think it often shows up in disagreements about priorities, maybe different communication styles that just don't mesh.
Yeah, or a lack of shared long-term goals, maybe.
Definitely. That's a big one.
Okay, next up is act your age, meaning to behave in a manner considered appropriate for someone of your age. Example, stop being so childish and act your age. What's the underlying tension with this phrase in the episode?
Well, the unspoken pressure to act your age really permeates the episode, doesn't it?
How so?
Carrie implicitly questions whether she's behaving appropriately by dating someone younger. And there's this subtle sort of societal judgment about what constitutes age-appropriate behavior in relationships.
Right.
The episode gently pokes at these expectations and the discomfort that arises when people deviate from them.
It definitely raises questions about who gets to define what's appropriate at different life stages.
Exactly. Who makes the rules?
Our next phrase is the real deal, meaning something genuine and authentic, not fake or superficial. Example, after years of casual dating, she was finally looking for the real deal. What is Samantha pondering in relation to this?
Samantha, especially in her interactions, seems to be grappling with the question of whether the fleeting excitement she finds with younger men is just, well, temporary fun.
Or something more?
Or if she's actually seeking the real deal, a genuine, meaningful connection with some substance and mental longevity. She's kind of at a point where she's evaluating her priorities.
Weighing the immediate thrill against the possibility of something more lasting. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have out of your league. Suggesting someone is too good or desirable for another, often in terms of attractiveness or social standing. Example, he's so successful and attractive, I feel like he's out of my league. How does Charlotte relate to this idea?
Charlotte briefly considers that the young bartender she's interested in might be out of her league.
Why? Because he's young and cool.
Yeah, basically due to his youth and perceived coolness. It just highlights the insecurities that can surface when there's a noticeable age gap, or even just a perceived difference in social cachet.
Even if those perceptions are totally self-imposed.
Often they are. It's that feeling of questioning your own desirability in comparison to someone else.
Right. The next phrase is, get your act together, meaning to start behaving responsibly or organizing your life effectively. Example, he needs to get his act together if he wants to keep his job. What's Carrie's perspective on this regarding younger men?
Carrie observes this general tendency among the 20-something men she encounters. They seem to still be in the process of getting their act together.
In terms of career, money?
Yeah, exactly. Careers, finances, long-term goals. This contrasts with her own more established position in life, obviously.
And that leads to?
It leads to a sense for her that they might not be ready for the kind of committed relationship she's perhaps looking for. It's a reflection on different timelines for achieving stability.
It's that feeling of waiting for someone to catch up to where you are in life, maybe.
Yeah.
Our next idiom is like a deer in headlights. Used to describe someone who is startled, confused, and unable to react. Example, when confronted with the evidence, he just stared like a deer in headlights. How does Carrie use this imagery?
Carrie uses this really vivid image to describe a younger man's completely bewildered and, frankly, lost expression when she tries to have a more serious, emotionally mature conversation with him.
Yeah.
It really underscores the communication chasm, and the different levels of preparedness they bring to navigating relationship complexities. It's such a powerful visual of that disconnect.
It paints such a clear picture of that feeling of being completely misunderstood or just not getting it.
Totally.
Then we have go with the flow, meaning to be flexible and adaptable, accepting things as they happen without trying to control them. Example, we didn't make any strict plans, we're just going to go with the flow. How does this contrast with the women's approach?
The 20-something guys in the episode seem to really embrace the go-with-the-flow approach to life and relationships. They exhibit a greater degree of spontaneity, it seems.
Whereas the women?
In contrast, the women, especially Carrie, tend to be maybe more focused on planning, understanding expectations, having a clearer sense of direction in their relationships.
It highlights different comfort levels with uncertainty then.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental difference in how they approach commitment and the future of a relationship.
Following that is living in the moment. Focusing on the present rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Example, she decided to stop stressing about tomorrow and just focus on living in the moment. How does Carrie perceive her younger date's focus on the present?
Carrie recognizes that her younger date is primarily living in the moment. He's enjoying the immediate experiences without necessarily considering the long-term implications for their connection.
Which has its appeal, I guess.
Oh, sure, there's an inherent appeal to this. But it clashes with Carrie's tendency to think about the trajectory of a relationship and, where it might be headed down the line.
It's a difference in their time horizons within the partnership.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. A contrast between enjoying the now and considering the what-ifs of the future.
Our next phrase is put someone on a pedestal, meaning to admire someone excessively, view them as perfect or faultless. Example, he put her on a pedestal and their eventual breakup was devastating. What observation does Carrie make about this?
Carrie reflects on how women, maybe including herself sometimes, can put young, attractive guys on a pedestal.
Idealizing them.
Yeah, idealizing them and creating this fantasy that doesn't quite align with reality. And this sets the stage for potential disappointment when the individual inevitably falls short of those unrealistic expectations.
It's the danger of infatuation blinding you to flaws.
Exactly. It's the risk of seeing what you want to see rather than the person as they truly are.
Then we have crash and burn, meaning to fail suddenly and spectacularly. Example.
Yeah.
Their ambitious startup unfortunately crashed and burned. How does this relate to Carrie's experience?
Well, Carrie's brief romantic endeavor with the younger man, while initially kind of exciting,
Yeah.
it ultimately crashes and burns. It doesn't develop into anything substantial and just quickly fizzles out. It really underscores the challenges posed by their fundamental differences.
It's quite a dramatic way to describe a relationship ending.
It is, isn't it? But it fits that feeling of something that just doesn't have the foundations to last and ends abruptly.
Okay. Next is test the waters, meaning to try something out cautiously to see if it will be successful or suitable. Example, before committing fully, they decided to test the waters with a smaller project. What is Carrie doing in this episode, essentially?
You could say that in many ways, Carrie is testing the waters of dating someone significantly younger.
Seeing if it works.
Yeah, seeing if a viable relationship could actually emerge. She's cautiously exploring this new dynamic, observing the differences, the challenges, navigating this unfamiliar territory.
It's an experiment, in a sense, gauging the viability of an unconventional pairing for her.
Precisely.
Our penultimate phrase is old soul, used to describe someone who possesses wisdom or maturity beyond their years. Example, despite his young age, he was often described as an old soul. What's Carrie's slightly humorous take on this?
Carrie playfully wonders if her younger date is genuinely an old soul with, hidden depths of wisdom, or simply exhibiting the typical self-assuredness of youth, perhaps mistaking a lack of experience for profundity.
Ah, that's funny.
It's a lighthearted observation on the tendency to sometimes look for deeper meaning where it might not necessarily exist.
It's that experienced skepticism kicking in. Okay, our final phrase is pulling the plug, meaning to bring something to an end or stop it from continuing. Example, after months of struggling, the company decided to pull the plug on the project. What decision does Carrie ultimately make?
Carrie ultimately makes the decision to pull the plug on pursuing relationships with younger men, at least, for the time being.
Why?
She recognizes that these experiences aren't fulfilling her long-term needs or leading to the kind of connection she truly desires.
So it's an active choice.
Yes, an active choice to stop exploring a path that doesn't feel right for her at that moment.
So, after testing the waters, she makes a conscious decision to end that particular experiment. Okay.
All sparked by this one episode.
Yeah.
And that title, Valley of the Come-Something Guys, it instantly makes you think of Valley of the Dolls, doesn't it? Kind of hints at something shiny, but maybe a bit empty.
Absolutely. That title's the perfect starting point, culturally speaking. It's a direct nod to Valley of the Dolls, which, dealt with those highs and lows, the potential disappointments for women.
Right.
So this title sets up a comparison. It suggests these young guys might seem exciting, desirable at first glance, but maybe they lack, real substance, staying power. It cleverly frames how the show's looking at dating younger men, potential superficiality.
Okay, let's dig into that cultural landscape more. You flagged the line about Gen X guys with bad haircuts and no money. What's the core insight there for someone maybe not familiar with that time?
Well, it seems like a throwaway line, but it actually captures something specific about the late 90s. Gen X, born mid-60s to early 80s, roughly had these stereotypes back then.
Okay.
Think like end of grunge, maybe a bit laid back, cynical even, and maybe some economic uncertainty after the 80s boom.
Right, okay.
So bad haircuts and no money kind of taps into that image.
Yeah.
The anti-establishment, maybe not focused on traditional success markers.
Yeah.
Tells you something about the dating scene then.
And the visual you pointed out, a pack of guys in flannel shirts and cargo pants, that paints a picture immediately. What's the fashion saying there?
Oh, totally. Flannel, cargo pants, 90s staples, right? Very influenced by the grunge scene, bands like Nirvana. It wasn't about looking sharp or tailored. It screamed youth, casualness, maybe even a rejection of, corporate style.
So the shortcut.
Exactly. A visual shortcut to an attitude places them instantly for viewers who live through it or know the references.
Now, one of the young guys is obsessed with Star Wars. You noted that as a generational thing. Why is that detail significant?
It's interesting how pop culture shapes identity, isn't it? For someone in their 20s then, the original Star Wars was huge growing up, a defining thing. So seeing a young adult still really into it, well, it could be seen a couple of ways. Connection with others who share it, sure. But maybe, in the context of the show and dating, clinging hard to childhood fandom could imply a bit of immaturity. Or maybe a reluctance to embrace more, quote-unquote, adult interests. That's likely the angle here.
Okay, then there's the contrast with Mr. Big. You picked up on this classic Hollywood leading man vibe, even if it wasn't explicitly stated. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating how they position him. He's the counterpoint. From the start, he's got that archetype. Sophisticated, mysterious, charming, older guy. Think Cary Grant, maybe Bogart.
Timeless.
Exactly. Timeless elegance, worldly, established. It sets him completely apart from the flannel and cargo crowd. It's a different kind of appeal experience, traditional masculine charm.
The show also has the women hitting trendy NYC bars. You said this mirrors the actual late 90s Manhattan scene. What was that like?
Oh, definitely. New York in the late 90s, especially for young professionals, had this buzzing social energy, a really active nightlife.
Right.
Certain bars, certain neighborhoods were the places to be seen. So the show depicting the women navigating those spots, it felt real. It captured that vibe, the dating rituals, the search for connection in that specific urban setting.
And Charlotte's date at the modern art exhibit, that seemed to carry some weight in your notes. What themes does that bring out?
It's a neat little scene because it reveals so much through a simple activity. Charlotte works in art. She clearly values culture, maybe a certain refinement. Her date's reaction, uninterested, maybe shallow. It immediately highlights a potential clash in values. It shows how shared cultural appreciation, or the lack of it, can be a big deal in compatibilities, goes beyond just looks.
And Carrie's voiceover about women being the new men. What's the context for that line back then?
That really taps into big shifts happening with gender roles.
Yeah.
Late 90s, you saw this growing narrative, especially in media, about urban women taking more charge.
In career and
in romance, sex, yeah. Carrie's line reflects that women, not just waiting, but actively pursuing what they want, maybe even taking on traditionally male dating roles. It's the show reflecting and contributing to that conversation.
Gotcha. Lastly, on the cultural side, you brought up the thrill of the chase. Why flag that common trope?
Well, it's just so pervasive in Western dating ideas, isn't it? That excitement of the initial pursuit, the uncertainty, the effort.
We're at the game almost.
Exactly. There's an allure there. But as the show often explores, that initial thrill doesn't always translate to something real or lasting. It's a romanticized idea that can mask deeper issues sometimes.
Okay, fascinating. Let's pivot now to the grammar stuff you pulled out. Really interesting points here for advanced learners. First up, narrative tense switching in Carrie's voiceovers. Past simple versus past perfect. Can you break that down?
Yeah, this is something Carrie's narration does really effectively. It creates reflection, hindsight. Take your example. I thought dating a 20-something would be exciting, but I had forgotten how chaotic those years were.
Okay.
See, thought and would be past simple set her initial view in the past, but then had forgotten past perfect jumps further back to her even earlier experiences of chaotic youth.
Ah, right, before the decision to date him.
Exactly. The past perfect acts like a mini time jump within the sentence. It layers the sequence of events and adds that reflective understanding. It's very neat.
Very neat. Okay. Then conditionals for hypotheticals. The classic. If I were 10 years younger, I'd totally date him. What's key here?
That's the second conditional. Spot on. And the key is, it's for talking about unreal situations now or in the future.
Things that aren't true.
Precisely. The structure if plus past simple, like were, even if you are not younger, then would plus base verb date signals were in hypothetical land.
So it lets you play what if.
Yeah, explore possibilities, express wishes, imagine things differently from reality, grammatically playing out scenarios.
Cool. Okay, modal verbs next. Deduction, advice. Examples like, he must be about 25, or you shouldn't get involved. These little words do a lot, don't they?
They really do. They're about conveying certainty levels and giving guidance. Must be about 25. Must show strong deduction, high probability based on clues.
Versus might be.
Right, might be, is way less certain. Then shouldn't is clear advice, a negative recommendation. Modals let us be nuanced, not just facts, but assessments, opinions, suggestions.
Yeah.
Very useful.
Definitely. Now, cleft sentences for emphasis. This was interesting. Your example. What I needed was someone who could have an actual conversation. How does that structure change the feel?
The key with cleft sentences is focus. They let you highlight one specific part of the sentence. The structure, often what, or it is was, splits the idea.
So instead of just, I needed someone.
Exactly. What I needed was, puts the spotlight squarely on what was needed, the conversational partner. It makes that the main point, adds emphasis, maybe a bit of dramatic weight.
I see. Okay. Ellipsis and informal reduction, dropping words in casual chat like you going out tonight. What does that tell us?
It tells us we're hearing real spoken English. Ellipsis, leaving out words understood from context, is super common. Dropping are from are you going out tonight is totally natural in casual speech.
And sentence fragments. Guy like that, not worth it.
Same principle. Speed, informality, shared understanding. It mimics the rhythm of real talk. Recognizing this is crucial for understanding and sounding natural, especially in a fast-paced setting like the show depicts.
Makes sense. Relative clauses, defining versus non-defining. You said it really comes down to the commas.
It really does, visually at least. The comma is the key marker. A defining clause, like, the guy who ghosted me is now married, identifies which guy. No commas needed because it's essential info.
Right. Take it out, and we don't know who you mean.
Exactly. But a non-defining one, like, my ex, who lives in LA now, texted me again, gives extra info about the ex we already know. The comma signal, this is additional detail.
Like a little aside.
Precisely. Comma, pause, extra info, not essential identification. Simple but powerful distinction.
Okay. The subjunctive mood. I wish you were older. That word instead of was always feels a bit formal, different.
You can feel that way, yeah. The subjunctive is for things contrary to fact, hypotheticals, wishes. Using were in I wish he were older signals exactly that it's a wish, not reality.
And the other type, like, it's important that he be confident.
Right. Using the base form, be not is, after phrases like important that, suggests that that's also subjunctive. It might sound formal sometimes, but it's about expressing desires, recommendations, hypotheticals accurately. It's the grammar of what isn't, but could be.
Got it. Adds a layer of precision. Finally, inversion for emphasis. Your example. Little did I know he still lived with 3 roommates. Flipping the word order, when does that happen?
It's stylistic, mainly for emphasis, drama, or a more formal, even literary feel. It often follows negative or limiting adverbs at the start. Little did I know. Not only never have I, rarely do we.
So you put the phrase first, then flip the verb and subject.
Exactly. Little did I know, not little I knew. It draws attention to what comes next, creates surprise, or highlights the statement's importance, adds flair.
Wow, okay. We really have gone deep on just one episode here. Thinking back on the cultural stuff, it's amazing how much it captures that late 90s New York dating world. The norms, the styles.
Absolutely. Those references are like snapshots. Fashion, social dynamics, generational touchstones, gender role discussions. They give such rich context to the show and the era.
And for advanced English learners listening, those grammar points are just gold, aren't they? Understanding tense shifts for reflection, conditionals for what-ifs, how a comma changes meaning. That's the kind of deeper understanding that really boosts comprehension and, makes your own English more fluent and sophisticated.
Totally agree.
Carrie Bradshaw finds herself drawn to a charming, attractive 20-something guy, despite her usual reservations about dating younger men. Encouraged by his enthusiasm and spontaneity, she dives into a fling that initially seems exciting, but soon reveals the generational and emotional gaps between them. Meanwhile, her friends are also confronting the appeal and pitfalls of dating younger guys. Samantha, always adventurous, embraces the youthful energy and sexual freedom of dating someone much younger, while Charlotte hesitates, questioning whether she can truly connect with someone who hasn't fully matured. Miranda, ever skeptical, refuses to romanticize the idea altogether. Throughout the episode, the women grapple with the question, is youth and excitement worth the lack of depth and stability? Ultimately, Carrie realizes that while younger men might be fun for the short term, they may not offer the kind of connection she's really seeking.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy learning new words, phrases, grammar, and cultural references from Sex and the City. I will be back with the next lesson soon. Until then, bye.